Hi everyone, and welcome to the NTT Microsoft Online Teams event. I'm really pleased to have you here this afternoon. My name's Laura Ritson. I'm the Queensland State Manager for NTT, and we've got a great agenda to take you through today, and we'll try to get you within the hours to get you back on your way for the rest of the day. So to take you through the agenda, we're going to kick off. I'll do a bit of an intro to the team that you'll hear from today. Then we'll step in and hear from our cloud communications team. And then we've got Microsoft presenting for us as well. We'll then translate this to what it means for you through our client reference, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. As part of that, we've got a Q&A function, so I encourage you to drop those questions through, and we'll try to capture that as part of the session. If your name's in there and we haven't got to that, we'll summarise and come back to you after the session today. So I suppose I just wanted to touch on the reasons why that we thought this event would be important. We've been doing a lot with government and really understand the savings and debt initiatives that is going across government today. We feel that this is something that state could take value out of, and we've been working pretty hard with the core people in government to establish an offering under the Collaborative Workspaces panel. We've done that to give a couple of, I suppose, benefits to state in the telecommunications and ICT space, which is, have a look at having some cost savings as well as taking the most benefit you can out of your Microsoft investment. So that's sort of the reason behind why we think this is a good opportunity for state. Therefore, I'll sort of let Craig talk on what the NTT proposition is. I'll then have Victor speak to the Microsoft piece. And we've also got Travis on board as well, who's our government client representative as well from the NTT group. So I'll hand over to Craig to take us through the first piece of the presentation.
Right, excellent. Thanks, Laura. So for those of you who don't know me, Craig Whittingham, I'm the Head of Solutions Consultants across ANZ for NTT Cloud Comms. Long time NTT employee, 17 years or so, and actually based here in southern Queensland. So good to talk to you all. So what I'm going to go through is I'm going to go through a couple of different things that we offer you guys, right? So the main one is we're going to talk about modern working, what that experience is going to look like for your staff. And really how you actually enhance that with the things that are coming through from Microsoft and NTT and how you take best advantage of that, right? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to kind of step back in time a little bit, I guess, and think about the way that we traditionally did working environments and how those working environments have changed over the last 2 years or so with COVID, and what, more importantly, kind of what those environments look like moving forward. And there are a significant amount of changes that are coming forward through the whole COVID thing. And how things are being migrated and all that sort of stuff, right? So if you think about the way that we traditionally did things, we had these monolithic offices, and in those offices we put all of our people, and everybody came together in those offices. All of the connections happened in that office. All of the data linkage, all of the telephone calls, everything else, all the coffee table chats, all that sort of stuff. Everything happened in the office, right? Okay, and then COVID came along, right? And the lucky thing with COVID, lucky maybe not, the good thing, I guess, about when COVID came along is that the pieces that we needed to have in place to enable our employees to work outside the office have largely been building over the last couple of years, right? And so by the time we had COVID hit, we're actually at this real inflection point where the technology had really caught up with what we needed to do at that time. And the reality is, if COVID had hit maybe 5 years earlier than it did, we probably all would have been in a much worse position than we were for remote working, right? So the things that we really need to look at is, we're trying to translate that office experience and actually allow people to have that office experience when they're working home. And some of the challenges that came with that were predominantly based around a couple of things. So the main thing is that all of the services, as I said, we had delivered into the offices. So how do you actually get all of those tools and platforms and all the other things that people need out to the edge where people are actually working at home, right? So that was one of the major challenges that we had. And traditionally we solved that with instant messaging and presence apps. Clients might have had Skype for Business or other applications that they were using. Maybe they were using, some older Cisco technology. Maybe they were using Microsoft Teams. And that was really good, right? So the good thing was that most companies had some tool that they could use to allow people to work remotely, right? But it wasn't necessarily the best experience for those people, right? And I think everybody here would probably agree that if you guys are like other clients that we dealt with, that rush in the first kind of 6 months or so of COVID was a particularly crazy time for all of us in this industry, right? And not as much time was given to, what are the ROI benefits of doing this? Should we really look at that? How do we enhance employees when they're at home and give them a better experience, rather than just saying, hey, here's a tool, you can use it at home, you're kind of on your own, right? And on that employee productivity thing, I guess one of the things that I should mention, and I don't know whether you guys have had the same experience as us, but certainly within our organisation, we found that the Great Work From Home experiment generated around about a 3% productivity improvement for our business, which I know was a shock to a lot of people, because there are a lot of people in the industry, a lot of people who work for our company, and I'm sure people that work in your organisations at the moment who are really wedded to this, employees must be in the office thing, right? But I think those days have completely gone. So workplaces are really evolving. So one of the challenges that comes with that evolving workplace is, as I said, all of the things that you had in the office that you don't normally have at home. So things like meeting spaces, being able to do, online events, being able to conference in people, being able to have contact centers that are operating from home. In some of the businesses that you guys run, you'll have compliance recording and knowledge management requirements that you're going to need to meet as well, right? And so the challenge is, how do you pull all of these things together, and then how do you actually work out how you get to that end state that you want to get to, right? So these are some of the things that at NTT we do. We do those through a thing that we called our cloud deployment framework, which is just basically a really prescriptive way of us sitting down with you guys and working through all the different elements that you need and coming up with a plan that gets you to that endpoint in the way that you need to get there. So the challenges that we've really got here are, how do the employees actually adapt to this change? And some of the employees are going to be great with it, right? Some are like, yep, you know what, I want to work from home forever, right? And then there are other employees who are like, you know what, I really miss that office environment, right? So what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with this hybrid working environment where you're going to have some people that are working from home all the time, some people that are working in the office all the time, and some people that are going to flip between the two of them all the time, right? And how do we make sure that the experience for all those people and the security for all those people and network connectivity for all those people is appropriate, right? Because people are going to move between those buckets as well, right? And one of the ways that we do that, of course, is with Teams, right? So Teams is really good. It's one of the key tools that we have today in the collaboration kind of space that we look at. Most of you guys will already be familiar with the way that Teams work. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the way that calling works, right, within Teams and the meeting spaces elements and those sorts of things. So traditionally what we did, of course, is that if you wanted to have telephony, so phone services delivered, they were delivered by Telstra Optus directly into your office. And then with Teams, what we started to do is we started to do a thing called direct routing, where you could actually go and choose your carrier, have that carrier connect into Teams, and then from within the actual Teams client, you can start to make outbound calls, right? And that means that you can remove phones off desks, you can change a hot desk setup, all that kind of stuff that makes it much more easier for people to work from home if they can make calls in and out and that sort of stuff. Now, the next logical step on from that was, well, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually just kind of go into the Microsoft Teams portal and I could just click to add some calling minutes, right? Or I could click to add some services, right? And that's where everything's moving to, right? So that, you guys no longer have to have a discussion with your carrier about, oh, okay, I need to buy 100 numbers for this new office that I want to set up in Brisbane as part of the work that we're doing for the new Olympics that's coming to the state, right? And I think that's a challenge that we're all going to see over the next 10 years, is that there's going to be a lot of this, right, where sites are kind of set up and torn down as programs of work happen around the Olympics, right? And traditionally, yeah, you had to call your carriers and they would set up the numbers. But the modern way of doing things is Operator Connect, right? And what is Operator Connect? Fundamentally, it's just the ability to be able to add telephone numbers directly into your meeting platform, right? So in this case, Teams, right? And you do that just straight through the Teams administrator portal, right? So you can just go in, you can go, I would like 100 numbers in Toowoomba, please. click, click, bang, you've got those numbers, and now you can assign them to your end users, right? So that's the way that things are changing. Oh. And what this is really about doing is, we want to enable those employees that we've got there. We want to make sure that we allow for distributing employees. One of the things that we're not seeing a lot of at the moment, but is really important, is the workplace wellness and the environmental factors in the office, right? So I think when we do move back to an environment where we're in a more normal kind of working environment, that even the traditional hot desks that we had in offices are going to change, because we're no longer going to have phones in those hot desk environments, right? Because we want the entire office, or as much of the office as we can, to be low touch, right? So, or even all those things are going to change. So it's naturally going to drive everybody to running a phone off their desktop, right? And I know for some people that's something that they're just going to have to get used to, and there are other people that just won't evolve to that, right? They're just going to always want to have desks on their phone, and that's fine too, right? So we can work with either of those things. Yep. So Operator Connect. So what are the real benefits for you guys, right? So Operator Connect, as I said, is really just a method for you guys to be able to go onto your Teams portal and choose a carrier, in this case NTT, we'd hope, and just go click, click, and have the telephony service automatically delivered to your end user clients with no other real interaction from you guys other than deciding who wants to get the DIDs, right? And one of the interesting things about the NTT offer is that not only do we support this functionality out of Microsoft, we're one of the global launch partners with Microsoft, and I'm sure Victor will go into that a little bit later. But also, interestingly for you guys, we have a number of different plans, and those plans can be broken up not just on a tenant level, but potentially on an office level or an individual level, right? So it means for those of you who are running different offices with different teams in your departments, you might want to have a different plan for different teams in different offices, right? And that's something unique to NTT. It's one of the value propositions that we have for you guys. Of course, this all leverages the design that's been done through collaboration with Microsoft. So, it's all encrypted, all that sort of stuff. You get easy access to the services, billing, administration portal, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of the pain that used to be there with ordering numbers and moving them around is completely gone. So you can just literally go onto the portal and say, I want to deliver that Toowoomba number to a person that's working out of a South Bank office, for example, right? And you can do that with a couple of clicks. And interestingly, we do that too across the globe. So if you guys, or some of the departments that are here today, you guys will probably have some interaction with people overseas because of the Olympics that maybe you wouldn't have had in ordinary times. So we do offer this service overseas as well. So you can, you can jump in and out as you need. Of course, the ability of having it already pre-connected with Microsoft is that it's truly a pay-as-you-go structure, right? So as you guys need more numbers, you can just add them. If you no longer need numbers anymore, or your department's changing or merging, then you can just go click, click, and you can remove those numbers, and you don't have to pay for them next month, right? And of course, this is really cost competitive. I'm going to go into a ROI analysis with you guys a little bit later, just to give you a view of kind of what the savings potentially can be for some of the organisations. So how do we actually deliver this to you guys, right? So we have a number of different consulting programs that NTT does in conjunction with Microsoft to get you guys to that kind of endpoint, right? And the initial engagements are all about working out, well, what's your return on investment? What does the employee experience look like? What's the experience that you guys are looking for? So some of you guys will have different experiences that you're looking for from other government departments, right? And certainly different from what we've provided. But there are a lot of other things that are going to be similar amongst what we've done for other clients and what you guys are going to do yourself. So that employee experience is a really key thing. And the good thing is a lot of those assessments in the consult phase there can actually be funded, right? So they're Microsoft funded, so they don't necessarily cost you guys. It's a collaborative piece of work between NTT, Microsoft, and each of your departments to get that work done. And then that naturally flows on to the cloud deployment framework that I talked about earlier. And again, some of those pilots can be funded by Microsoft. And out of that comes a full recommendation plan about how you then move on. And then once you're into day 2, then there's a whole heap of things that we can do around support services and managed services for your organizations as well. Because some of you will want to run these things yourself, and some of you may want to fully outsource the operational aspects of it. So NTT can do that for you as well. So we're just going to dive into the business case here and the ROI. So the business case that I'm going to talk about is actually one of the Queensland Government customers already with us, one of the departments up here. And so what I wanted to just draw your attention to is the cost savings that we've actually managed to get for this particular client. So on this line here, the total savings line down the bottom here, whoop, go back. You can see that in year one they saved 234,000, and over the 5-year total they saved just on 1.2 million, which is about 58% of their telecommunications budget that they had. So that meant that they had 42% more money to go and spend on other things within their telecommunications budget, or they could use that saving to meet some of the government things that are coming through at the moment around cutting cost out of your business as well. So this is just a real life example of the sorts of savings that you can get, and they are significant. So how do we support your organisation? So just quickly, one of the things with this, when you're moving to Teams, is that it's not just purely a Microsoft environment, right? There are lots and lots of other devices that get hooked into this, whether they're meeting rooms or phone systems, those sorts of things, whether they're additional services like compliance recording or indeed digital events that you want to run, all that sort of stuff. Most of you will have things like DECT phones and in-tune devices, that sort of stuff, or old Teams phones that are sitting in your environment that you want somebody to manage as well. And then potentially you might even want someone to take on the management and the operational aspects around Exchange, SharePoint, StreamYammer, those kind of things, right? So NTT has that. So if you wanted us to just talk to you about Teams and just the deployment of Operator Connect, then we can do that. If you later wanted us to talk about taking on management of some of these other aspects, then we have those things as well. So along with that, what we do is we build in with those management tools a whole heap of automation. And when I go in a bit later, I'll go into detail around that, around the case study that we had and how we were able to drive their costs down through that automation aspect as well. Of course, it's all SLA driven, that sort of stuff, multi-vendor, all the sorts of things that you would expect from NTT. All right, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Victor to take over the Microsoft part of the presentation.
Thanks, Greg. As a very brief introduction, Victor Kochetkov, I'm Teams technology specialist. I've been with Microsoft for about 5 years. Actually, recently moved from Sydney to Brisbane, and I used to do the same role in New South Wales, so was actually a Teams technology specialist as well, and I look after the whole New South Wales. So, first of all, I would like to say thank you to NTT for a long-term awesome relationship. So NTT was a Microsoft Communications Partner of the Year last year, and as you can see, NTT got multiple gold certification in many areas. So NTT is very well positioned to help customers, not just around telephony and meetings, but also around Office 365 adoption in general. But by the way, NTT was also one of the first telcos who introduced direct routing as a service. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about hybrid workplace paradox. So many organizations were actually forced into hybrid working or previously working kind of a flexible remote working during the pandemic. Some organizations were better prepared than others. So at Microsoft, for example, we actually embraced the flexible working prior to pandemic, and we had all the tools in place at the time of pandemic hit. However, some other organizations were actually in a rush implementing those technologies. But if to be honest, the workplace, the hybrid workplace or remote working is not just about tools, about the tools availability or capabilities, etc. It's also about the personal life. So different people may have a different family commitments, kind of a homeschooling, different shifts, arrangements, etc. However, what Microsoft done, we actually did a research, and there is a link to all the details about that research. The research Work Trends Index, We run it in about 31 countries, and we asked 30,000 participants. So the questions were around remote working and how they see the work going forward after the pandemic is over. So interesting enough that about 73% of participants said that they are considering flexible working post-pandemic because they adopted, they like it, there are some benefits in doing so. From a management perspective, 80% of managers expect to have more flexible work policies post-pandemic, so they are considering to keep that flexible working available even after we are allowed to come back to office. However, on the other hand, 67 participants highlighted that they would like to have more in-person work and collaboration experience post-pandemic. And they're saying that staying connected while working from home is really, really hard. Again, if you consider how the normal meeting used to look like prior to pandemic, people working in the office and able to gather in a meeting room were kind of a better position to collaborate, where the people joining remotely were considered as a less included into conversation. So let's see how Microsoft, together with NTT, can actually help you to address those challenges. So first of all, as I mentioned, Microsoft was really well positioned, as well as many other companies. And if to be honest, Teams becomes at forefront of solving that problem for us, as well as many other organizations. Currently, we've got around 150 million people around the globe using Teams on a daily basis. And Teams is much, much broader than just communication. However, today, I would like to focus on two kind of capabilities of Teams. Is a meetings and meeting room experience, as well as calling or telephony. So as I mentioned, those scenarios with a hybrid where some people are actually working from home, some people working in office. The in-meeting room experience is becoming extremely important to provide that inclusivity, provide interaction during the meeting for everyone, regardless where they are. And Microsoft Teams Rooms systems are actually designed with this as a main focus. Another goal for us to design meeting room devices was actually ease of use. So we really want to provide a very friendly, easy to use interface for your employees to just get into the room, click to join, click to share, and be able to control the meeting from the device independently on the meeting room specifics, right? So we're trying to introduce that experience, the easy of use experience across all the devices and across organizations. So for employees working for a number of organizations or moving from one agency to another, the experience will be exactly the same independently where they actually are joining the meeting. Meeting rooms are also very flexible and secure. So we've got many different hardware options from multiple vendors to allow you to equip any shared space and make it a Teams room compatible. Those devices can be managed and provisioned in a very secure and reliable way using the out-of-the-box tools available. Look, it's also important to address any existing scenarios that involve telephony, involve PSTN. So we need to be able to equip users to continue using telephony and be able to make and receive PSTN calls independently where they are, not just when they're at the desk and be able to access their IP handset sitting on a desk. So again, Teams in this case can become a very useful tool not just because it's helping to consolidate the end user experience and bring more and more capabilities into the same friendly interface across platform available from different devices, Windows-based, Apple-based, even a web browser. It also helps to simplify provisioning, administration, and monitoring, where you can have all the tools available through the Office 365 admin portal. Moreover, you can actually give some of those responsibilities. You can give those responsibilities to manage some capabilities such as the telephony to your partners such as NTT. Now, in regards to the telephony, again, I just would like to highlight some of the key points about the Operator Connect. First of all, Operator Connect is not an entire new thing, right? So the Operator Connect is actually based on a direct routing. So I would say this is an evolution of direct routing. Technology-wise, it's exactly the same. It's the way it's delivered is different. So it's a very simple way for you to provision telephony in Teams. It's a few clicks in a Teams admin portal. You select your telco provider, and by the way, you can have, as Greg mentioned, you can have different selections for different regions, and you can actually have a different selections based on different group of users within the same tenant. So it's really simple. You can set up it in minutes. All the provisioning for numbers, all the reporting, which is also very important, that all the quality data records, the quality of experience, everything available through the same set of tools, rather than you need to jump over different tools to gather this information. It doesn't require any on-premises infrastructure. However, you can actually mix and match. So, for example, you really need to integrate with the legacy systems that will stay in place for a period of time. You can implement direct routing today, and then you can escalate it. Sorry, you can upgrade it into Operator Connect, or run them in a parallel together. The main thing around the Operator Connect versus direct routing, when you become operator within Operator Connect, you actually are going through the certification program with Microsoft. So we supply all the blueprints, all the best practices around how to implement the Operator Connect versus the direct routing, which was actually the responsibility of every provider to design and implement it. Just to highlight a few enhancements in comparison to direct routing. First of all, Operator Connect requires a direct peering between a telco provider data center where the SBCs are located and Microsoft Azure data centers where the Teams services are running. So which actually provide assurance around quality of experience, as well as resiliency and high availability on a network base. Secondly, all the provisioning, management, reporting, as I mentioned, delivered through the very integrated and consolidated approach. So all the tools available for you through the Teams admin portal. However, you can delegate access to operator to manage all users or some users, and have a different operators to be involved as well. So from a support perspective, it's also very important to mention that in comparison to other offers on the market, we do have end-to-end support model for Operator Connect. We actually got a joint program to provide end-to-end support where the the NTT and Microsoft support talking to each other, and engineering teams talking to each other. We also got all the required tools in place to provide diagnostic alerting and overall health assurance for that service. And at last, I would also like to mention some of the joint programs that are available for you this fiscal year. So first of all, we've got a number of programs available around meeting room devices. So helping you to design and implement meeting rooms. Those programs are delivered via partners, and NTT is part of the program. We also have got a number of cloud accelerator workshops that used to be available in the last fiscal year, and we still provide them in this fiscal year with a little bit of different focus. We're focusing on a hybrid workplace and hybrid use cases. So I would definitely recommend you to look into the hybrid meetings, modernize communications, and transition to cloud workshops as kind of as pretty much a mandatory workshops that I would recommend you to run. Also, last fiscal year, we had a free audio conferencing trial, which was very well adopted by many organizations. And we're glad to announce that we're extending that trial. And if you haven't subscribed it yet and you are considering this, you still got time to join that program till the end of December this calendar year. For this kind of details, you can either talk to your NTT or Microsoft account teams to find more details about programs available for you. And with this, I'm handing over back to Craig to continue. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Victor. Let me just share my screen here again with you guys. All right, excellent. So I'm going to run you guys through a case study. This is actually a really interesting client that we did here in Queensland. They're a major bank. It's one of a number of banks and other large financial institutions that we've done very similar things across. So this particular bank, they had the same challenges that all the rest of us had when we moved to COVID, right? About moving staff out of their offices and all those kind of things, right? And they had a really messy environment, which I'm sure most of you guys do as well. So they had some Cisco on-premise equipment that they had. They even had some Skype for Business on-premise that they were running, and then they were moving to Teams collaboration. So they had a real mix of all three of those. And what they didn't have is they didn't actually have the skills to be able to manage that environment across all three of those and migrate people across and upgrade and maintain all of those, right? So that's where NTT was actually able to help them to come in with a managed service that worked across all of those things, and help them get to where they wanted to get with in terms of the user experience that they were looking at, right? So they were really looking at, how do we continue to operate our business when people don't come into the bank, right? Like, how do we actually do that? How do we run our contact centers when we're all in lockdown? Because it's not like a local coffee shop. Banks are very large organizations, much like most of you guys run, and they're just not something that you can just shut down, right? They're kind of a critical piece of our economic infrastructure that needs to continually run. So what the bank decided they wanted to do is that they decided that they were going to basically migrate everybody that they could across to Microsoft Teams environment, that they're going to enable calling for all of these users, that people would be able to work from home and in the office. At the same time, they did a whole heap of reworking of their offices to go into that low touch environment that I talked about earlier. So they totally reworked the office environment for people as they come in. They managed to save a whole heap of money by getting out of leases that they already had and reducing down their office footprint as well. And at the same time, they saw productivity gains in the same kind of vein as what NTT did when we went through this reorganization as well. And the thing is that as we moved them through this, they were obviously provisioning users and deprovisioning users on each of these systems, right? And that was a challenge that I'm sure all of you guys have as well. And particularly with the banks, is deprovisioning users is a really critical thing for them because, like some of you guys, they get audited every 12 months or so. And one of the things the auditors always pick them up on is, what accounts are still active in the system, where the people no longer work in the bank and those sorts of things, right? So they had a real ability to be able to deprovision people really quickly and easily. And one of the ways that we did that was through the NTT automation. So we have a series of automation tools as part of our managed service that hooks into both Teams, Skype for Business if it's on-premise, and obviously the Cisco on-premise stuff. And that enabled them to actually provision and deprovision users across all of those systems just with a couple of clicks from within their own ITSM systems, so their own support systems. And the way that we enabled that is that we did all the integration with their ITSM systems, and then we do things like we take, if they have a new employee, John Smith, and he's going to be working in the new Toowoomba office that they're setting up, we pull out that user's name, we pull out the location that they're going to be working, we pull out their job title, and based on their job title and their location, we actually go through and we provision the features and functions for that particular worker. So if it's, for example, that manager who's going to be working out at Toowoomba, then maybe he gets some full dialing with voicemail capabilities, right? If it's somebody and their job title is, trainee teller, then maybe they wouldn't get that, right? So maybe we would just give them the ability to make internal calls with no external access and voicemail, right? And if they're a branch manager or a senior manager or some other manager within the organization, maybe we give them international dialing as well. But all of that stuff is automated, right? So it means that as people come onto the business, in this particular instance, they just get added into the HR system. HR system flows through to their ITSM. The ITSM system's hooked in with our automation, and so everything happens automatically with no touch, right? So if you're like a lot of other clients that we have, one of the problems is that you've had 20 different teams managing all these environments over the last 20 years, and changes get made all the time, but they get made differently by different people as well. So this is one of the great things about automation, is that every change gets made in exactly the same way, and it's all logged and automated. So the other advantage for this, obviously, is for the bank. They were typically looking at about 4 to 5 days to fully onboard a user and actually configure their email and their voice services and all those sorts of things. And we've reduced that down to a couple of hours now through the automation tools that we've got. So that was a case study that I wanted to run through. Any questions about that? Happy to take further questions. At this point, I think I'll hand back over to Laura and our Q&A.
Thank you, Craig. Point the first one through just so you can answer it if people haven't been reading the Q&A questions, Victor. So when will Operate Connect be ready was the first one that had come through.
Yes, sure. Operate Connect are already available for public preview. So basically, if you go to the Teams admin portal, go to the voice section, you will see operators there. You can list all the operators available, regions where they can provide in-dial number ranges, etc. NTT already there, so they were one of the first available for preview, and they will be available at general availability, which is a plan for this quarter. So we're expecting this basically towards the September timeframe. Jay will be there.
Excellent. Okay, that's great news. I'll probably chuck the next question over to you, Craig. I'm currently on-prem today. What's the next steps to migrate over?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question, and it's something that comes up all the time because it is a complicated thing, right? So probably the next steps are, reach out to us and we can come in, sit down with you and talk about some of those evaluations that we covered earlier, some of the research that we can share with you guys and actually look at developing a plan. And again, the good thing is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of those sessions can actually be funded through the vendor, Microsoft in this case as well. So they can be done at zero or very low cost to you guys.
Excellent. I don't think I've got any other questions, so I might just step in to wrap up. So I suppose the next piece is, what to do next. So we would love to connect with you. As Victor mentioned, feel free to reach out to the NTT team or the Microsoft team to have further discussions. We also understand that getting started is sometimes a bit of a nervous thing. So we've got a bunch of programs and can work with Microsoft to understand funding available. We can also work with you to understand sort of the ROI analysis and that sort of stuff to make sure that it makes sense for you. And then as a bit of a wrap up, feel free to take action by clicking the link that we'll share at the completion of this session. And any questions that you may have, we're happy to answer. But also, if you want to have a look at running a cloud calling workshop, we would encourage you to do that as well. So I would just like to say thank you all for your time. I'll get you back a little bit early today, but look forward to hearing from you as well.